I went to the pursuit of truth. This is unbelievable. This is Tony Blair. Why is he still being interviewed on British television? I mean, he should be a war criminal, no? For leading us into illegal wars and lying to the public. And here he is talking about lessons on leadership. Yeah, at the beginning when he was elected, he was probably a good leader, unless you're a student and you expect now you have to pay for your things, where they said they wouldn't do that. But when he joined up with George W. Bush and lied to us about the 45 minutes and the dossier, even if, you know, he'll claim that, well, he was given this intelligence and it wasn't him and whatever, but everyone knew that that wasn't real. Everyone knew there was no weapons of mass destruction because they've been looking for years in Iraq. And he just aligned himself with W. Bush and their intelligence. And now he's talking about leadership. Unbelievable.
I think most fans would say, no, I think we want someone who's had a bit of experience. So it is an extraordinary thing. And one of the reasons I wrote the book is that, you know, it is difficult. You do learn a lot as you're doing it, but if you can shorten that learning curve, it's to your advantage and to a country's advantage. And the really interesting thing is, when you look around the world today, the difference between the countries that succeed and fail, it's all about the quality of governance and decision making. And you know, you can get the countries side by side, same resources, same potential, same opportunity to succeed or fail. One succeeds, the other fails. It's all about the quality of the decisions. And therefore, if you can help leaders, you know, at least ask the right questions about how they set themselves up to succeed rather than fail, and it should be good.
What was your biggest mistake?
Iraq.
The biggest.
I mean, I always say to people, it's for me to know and others to find out. But I'm sure there's a lot of people who would say it's over post 9/11 and Afghanistan and Iraq and so on. But you know, I've debated that issue many times.
Is that what you think, though? It's easy to say what other people might think, but what do you
I think for me, the thing that I learned most is the need right at the outset, if you're going to make change, to assemble the right people and the right policy in place that's going to deliver you long-term structural change. And in my first term, you know, leave aside all the foreign policy stuff, in my first term, when we tried doing reforms,
wipe away all the blood from your hands.
They weren't, although we did many reforms, they weren't in health and education, law and order particularly, there weren't the reforms I really thought were the right ones. And in my second term, when I reorganized government, introduced things like the delivery unit, and which is now replicated in different parts of the world, I had a much clearer understanding how to make the system work and how to do deep reform.
It's interesting. It feels a bit like you're saying that you should have gone further, if anything, earlier. You know, you talk about the best leaders being change makers. And it's hard to say, you know, when you came into power in 1997, you did quite a lot of radical stuff quite early. You know, you gave the Bank of England independence. You know, you talked about the minimum wage. Look at Keir Starmer. You know, he's cut the winter fuel allowance. He's made a few speeches about how difficult everything is.
Yeah, but he hasn't put us in an illegal war, has he? I mean, I don't understand how he just wipes his hands of the blood of the people that went into an illegal war. The United Nations Kofi Annan said afterwards, obviously not during, but everyone knew it was an illegal war, and the use of those UN resolutions was completely corrupt. And most people who weren't brainwashed to just being patriotic and following whatever the media, unless you're watching Channel 4, who are really the only ones who sort of try to show the other side. I mean, we all knew. I mean, did we think, really, honestly, that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, and not only that, weapons of mass destruction that could launch in 45 minutes and hit anything, but particularly in the United Kingdom or the United States of America? Come on. I mean, the country had been through one conflict, and he was heavily regulated, Saddam Hussein. And we all know, well, or maybe we do now, that under international law, my understanding is regime change is illegal. And what happened to Iraq and Afghanistan? When the British and Americans in the West went in, did they remain with the same regime or not? No, they did not. Saddam Hussein was overthrown and was beheaded, I say, and in Afghanistan they got rid of the Taliban and put in their own puppet dictators, like they did in Egypt and like they've done in other countries around the world. This isn't some new plan that the CIA or US or UK have been doing it for generations. It's just it was all done on TV. It's a shame that it wasn't done now with mobile phone journalists, because they wouldn't have got away with half the things that they got away with then. Maybe the war wouldn't have taken place. 1 million people came out to protest. 1 million people came out to protest that the war was illegal and it should stop. And that didn't make any difference. And he's written a book and talking on TV still about choices that leaders make are so important, when he made such a poor choice befriending George W. Bush so that he could, make himself look more powerful, because it certainly did, because they looked like the two most powerful men in the world when we saw pictures of Iraq and Afghanistan exploding into flames night after night. But what about the innocent people that were killed, the collateral damages, as they would call it? Just so that they could get what? Oil deals or just to destabilise the area. I mean, well, I don't think it was really about 9/11, which, there was just released the MI5 arrested a man that was filming around locations in America, and he had video and they never gave it. Well, they probably did. They probably didn't want to release it because, you know why they didn't want to release it? Because if he was really connected to the people on board the plane, it would have made it very difficult for them to go to Iraq and Afghanistan when they were all Saudis. And when America let all the Saudis go the day after 9/11, or the royal ones. So that's why it was never released, because that would have made the argument a lot stronger that, wait a minute, this guy's a Saudi, he was working for the Saudis, he was casing Washington DC, which is maybe where the fourth plane was meant to go. That's what a lot of people say, the one that crashed in the field without any debris. And that would have then strengthened that would have made it difficult for them to go to Iraq and Afghanistan, although I suppose their argument was that Osama bin Laden was fleeing there. But what I mean is, he was an individual. I assume he's a Saudi, isn't he? So just because he was fleeing in another country, well, unless you're saying that country helped him do 9/11, which, considering they're all Saudis, I'm not sure there's any evidence to support that. Unless, Saddam Hussein or the Taliban were giving him money, or people or Saudi dissidents, I don't know. But I don't know really what the connection between them really is, other than that he was... Do you know what I mean? If Osama bin Laden was living in America next to George W. Bush, who was his friend at one point, would they invaded America then? So I don't really know what the logic is. Everyone knew it was an illegal war and just a misuse of UN resolutions to their favour because they set them up. Not that I'm not, defending any of the bad things that were done. Yes, the bad things done, and I'm sure there were bad people and this, that and the other. And maybe they would say, well, the means justifies the ends, but just for Tony Blair to be writing books and going on TV when a lot of people would rather he was in prison. I'm sure there's a lot of people that are still, think that what he did was right, because they probably don't care, because they probably see, well, these are not us, so we don't worry about that kind of mentality that a lot of people do have. But these are human beings that suffered in Iraq and Afghanistan, that are still suffering to this day because of the actions that these two men took, George W. Bush and Tony Blair. They were the heads. They were the ones that sent the soldiers, because they weren't going to go themselves to Iraq and Afghanistan and fight, were they? They sit in their cosy little homes writing books and doing TV talks, while the people they sent out have got PTSD, or have committed suicide, or have died of disease, cancer and things like that, because of the weapons that they had to be close to. Or, realise that now what they did, they killed people that were just like, in a human side, taking away the system, that what they actually did was follow someone else to kill people that are exactly like themselves, brainwashed, believing that what you're doing and what your country's doing is right, and you should fight for that. Individuals that just have families and just human beings just like you or me, if they have that realisation. But Tony Blair, just to sort of push it to a side, push aside foreign policy. And my biggest mistake, your biggest mistake was Iraq and Afghanistan. Your biggest mistake was standing up in front of us and as an elected Prime Minister lying to us, well, I suppose it's in your name, but lying to us about the weapons of mass destruction that were never ever found, lying to us about the 45 minutes, even if, I don't believe that he wasn't unaware that the intelligence was poor. If someone comes up to you, no matter who they are, and says, well, they got weapons that can attack the UK in 45 minutes. Iraq? Really? Where did they get these weapons from? Did the Russians, did the Americans sell them to them? Have you ever, how many years they were under the kibosh, under the UN, under all the regulations to hide all these weapons that, that maybe even we didn't have, do we? Well, I suppose we have nuclear weapons that could do that, but I mean, just to not question that. But he didn't care because he just wanted to cozy up with George W. Bush and just wanted to make the money or the power that came from whatever the real reason for Iraq and Afghanistan were. But just beggars belief that institutions like Sky News and BBC and etc. are still inviting him to talk, when a few years back they were talking about, well, should he be facing criminal action for what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan as the leader at that time. Not only just for the fact of the dossier, the lies, the 45 minutes of weapons of mass destruction, but also what the soldiers did in their names, which was brought out by WikiLeaks and stuff like that. Crimes against humanity, against international law. Regime change, for one, which was quite obviously what was done. But because they sort of, the way it was happened, because they say, well, no, it wasn't us who did it. It was the people that did it. Come on. Anyway, sorry about my rant about Tony Blair. Take care, take it easy. God bless and peace.